There is a seemingly almost endless list of licensed video games and games based on movies that turned out to be utterly shit. Take Alien's Colonial Marines, for example. A game notorious for terrible AI, later discovered to be because the developers misspelled a single word in the game's code. Or how about E.T., a game every bit as shit as you would expect when the entire thing was coded by one guy in just 6 weeks. A game so bad it was a major contributor to the crash of the Western gaming market in 1983, and led to hundreds of thousands of unsold copies being crushed, covered in concrete and buried in the Nevada desert. The Nintendo NES version of Ghostbusters, including an endless climb through an apartment block to face off with Zool at the end, all while having the single worst rendition of Ghostbusters theme tune playing on a loop. Or Cliffhanger on the MegaDrive, a game so monumentally terrible it actually makes the movie look good in comparison. The list goes on. Superman 64, Home Alone, Street Fighter the movie, the game, Last Action Hero, Back to the Future, Fight Club. Honestly, I reckon I could make a 3-hour-long video of just reading a list of shit licensed games. But that is not what I'm here for today. Today I'm going to talk to you about something rarer than a politician telling the truth. A licensed movie game that is actually not shit. Today, my friends, we're talking about Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. Now, Michael Jackson himself was a polarising figure. Ask people for their thoughts and memories of him, and you'll likely get some pretty varied responses. There are some that will forever be appreciative of the genius of Thriller, Billie Jean and Smooth Criminal. There'll be others that will perhaps go straight for his eccentricity. I mean, building a theme park at his house, spending hordes of money on things nobody would ever possibly need, and taking his pet monkey Bubbles everywhere. Others still will refuse to look past the darker side of the man himself, his questionable relationships with children, and the endless allegations that he was never able to shake. But ask a gamer from the early 1990s, and there is every chance they will say Moonwalker. Not just an impossibly cool dance move that countless drunk individuals think they can do before proceeding to make themselves like an absolute tit when trying to do it, Moonwalker is also the name of the Michael Jackson movie that released in 1988. I call it a movie, it's more like a 90-minute advertorial for Michael Jackson's music. However, an 8-year-old me was both profoundly confused by and yet somehow supremely entertained by Michael Jackson's Moonwalker when we first got it on VHS in 1989. While I grew up in Miami, Florida. As reportedly quite a gaming fan himself, Jackson approached Sega in 1988 with the idea of creating a video game around the movie featuring his music and likeness. Sega, seeing the opportunity to print a truckload of money, jumped at the idea and work began on a Moonwalker video game. Sega actually built 2 versions, one for an arcade machine and one for their home consoles. The arcade version launched in July 1990 and was a really successful machine. An isometric brawler, the game let players control Michael Jackson as he navigates around various environments, battling the evil henchmen and robots of Mr. Big. Not that Mr. Big from Sex and the City, the other Mr. Big, you know, the Joe Pesci one. Anyway, you kill loads of baddies, you rescue little children. The arcade game had an absolutely banging soundtrack. I remember my local arcade at a bowling alley having one, and I was taken aback by how loud it was. Both the music pumping out of it and the endless cries of Michael as players rescued the little kids throughout the level. You knew exactly how far the game any player was just from the music being played. I remember stood there pumping quarters into Outrun and Double Dragon, patiently waiting for a turn to play as it always had a crowd when it was new. And when I did get on, I was not disappointed. Shortly after, in August 1990, Sega unleashed home console versions of Moonwalker. The Sega Genesis had launched in the US in 1989 and was about to launch in Europe as the much cooler sounding MegaDrive in September 1990. And Sega wanted a game that would really showcase the machine's capabilities to deliver vastly improved visuals and audio over the 8-bit machines that were so dominant at the time. And Moonwalker was that game, albeit a very different game to the arcade. Gone was the isometric viewpoint and the more focus on combat, and in its place was a side-scrolling, multi-leveled platform game. The Genesis version was actually built on a heavily modified build of the Revenge of Shinobi engine, one of my favourite early Genesis games. But Sega at the time weren't just trying to build the MegaDrive/Genesis install base. Their aging 8-bit Master System had a much bigger install base, especially in Europe, and Sega diligently built another version of Moonwalker for it. At the time, as an early Genesis adopter, I picked up Moonwalker on the 16-bit platform, and I found a lot to like with it. I never saw the point in going backwards a generation, and I knew from the time that the Master System version was fundamentally very similar to the MegaDrive game, so I never bothered playing it. So when I decided that Moonwalker would be the subject of this retrospective, I decided to rectify that. So my friends, let's talk about Michael Jackson's Moonwalker for the Sega Master System. As I said, the home console versions of Moonwalker are side-scrolling 2D platform games. The game itself is divided up into 5 stages, each containing 3 levels. The objective on every level is to find and rescue a set number of little girls who have inexplicably found themselves stuck in doors that open both fucking ways, or behind bushes that they could just crawl out of, or in caves that they could just walk right out of. But seeing as there's no fun in that, Moonwalker essentially plays out as a hide-and-seek game across 15 levels. You've got to find the girls by doing a little spin on hiding spots while Jackson thrusts his pelvis into the face of whatever lurks behind said door. As well as finding all the little girls, Jackson also has endlessly spawning enemies to contend with, from Mr. Big's henchmen that walk threateningly towards him, from annoying dogs that jump at him, thugs that throw things at him, zombies that rise from the ground to attack him, as well as soldiers that will shoot guns at him. Thankfully, Jackson is armed with a plethora of utterly devastating attacks to dispatch said foes, including, a single deadly kick to the bollocks, a crouching deadly punch to the bollocks, as well as jumping and pointing at them to death. Savage. Each stage also has a power-up that transforms his hat into some kind of peaky blinder boomerang that allows you to do a ranged throw hat to death attack. An attack often more cumbersome and useless than the standard attack. You see, the issue with this upgrade is that while it does add range, the whole time from when you throw your hat to when it comes back, you can't actually move. That often leads to taking damage because you've got an enemy either side of you, or you accidentally throw your hat the wrong way. Once all the little girls have been found, you're immediately transported to the boss fight. This is actually different to the MegaDrive version, as in that one, once you found the last little girl, good old Bubbles the monkey shows up and perches on your shoulder, pointing the direction you have to navigate through a level now utterly devoid of enemies in order to initiate the boss fight. That part did used to piss me off about the MegaDrive game, an absolute waste of time which just became an annoyance. So the fact it's not included in the Master System version was actually very welcome. The said boss fights are basically just a few waves of the standard enemies from that stage, 2 or 3 at a time, that you have to murder until the game decides, you've finished the level. It's a bit of an anticlimax, but it is what it is. The 5 stages, Club 30, a parking garage, a graveyard, a cave network, and Joe Pesci's lair are all very distinctly different environments. And each level mixes a slight change in the action. Whereas the opening level teaches you to open every door on a very specific fucking pixel in case an enemy decides to spawn right on top of you when you open it, the parking garage introduces traps in the hiding places, as well as elevators to traverse vertically, rather than the stairs which are often bastard annoying to walk up and down. The graveyard introduces vertical platforming, as opposed to simple means to go up and down. And the cave levels make searching the area more challenging, as every cave you search will lead you to a single screen of enemies and platforms that you must find your way back out from. Stage 5 is by far the best. This introduces teleports, automated gun turrets which are attached to computer stations you can destroy to disable them, as well as more platforming elements, moving floor panels, and security doors. Stage 5 levels all feel like a maze, and it's a shame it waits until right at the end to introduce that, as it was by far my favourite level. Each stage also has its very own 8-bit Master System chiptune rendition of a popular Michael Jackson song. We're treated to short loops of classics like Smooth Criminal, Beat It, Billie Jean, Bad, and Another Part of Me. And this is where we need to just touch on the music and that seemingly odd, out-of-place choice of one of the songs. You see, Just Another Part of Me plays out in the graveyard level, a level featuring the atmosphere and enemies that you think would be a perfect fit for arguably Jackson's best song, Thriller. But it's not there. Thriller is nowhere to be found anywhere in the game. And it's so odd. Because of the 5 environments in the game, 4 of them are easily identifiable within the Moonwalker movie. The one environment in the game that isn't in the movie is, you guessed it, the graveyard. I found it weird even as a kid playing on the MegaDrive version that Thriller wasn't in it. It's the same for the arcade version. Thriller is conspicuous in its absence, especially as there is a seemingly perfect level design specifically for it. However, back in August 2018, a ROM dump emerged from a guy called Landon White, who had acquired a prototype of the MegaDrive version of the game, dated the 24th of April 1990, so around 4 months prior to the game's release. And that prototype, while basically the same as the final version barring a few very slight changes, had a slightly different soundtrack for Stage 3. So yes, it seems Level 3 was designed for Thriller. We never officially found out why it was changed. It's possible that it was a licensing issue. It's likely to do with the fact that Michael Jackson didn't actually write Thriller. That credit goes to Rod Temperton, who also wrote Rock With You and Off the Wall for Jackson. While not confirmed that I can find, it's most likely that Jackson wanted his own music for the game, and his rights to Thriller may not have extended to licensing it for a video game. But whatever the real reason, the music to the Graveyard stage was changed to Just Another Part of Me. And had it not been for the discovery and subsequent uploading of that prototype, we'd have never known for sure that Thriller was ever going to be part of the game. Anyway, the music. Sure, endless 30-second loops of chiptune Michael Jackson can get somewhat annoying. But to be fair, the tunes are easily identifiable as Michael Jackson songs. And in order to prove this, I asked my non-games playing wife to listen to the recordings I took from the game and see if she could work out what they were.
Beat it. I don't know. Another Michael Jackson song? Billie Jean. Bad.
So with a solid and respectable score from the music, I also want to touch on the special move available. By holding down the attack button and sacrificing a bunch of health, Jackson can kill the lights and bust out a stage-specific dance animation, and essentially dance all the enemies on the screen to death. Interestingly again, the dance animation on Stage 3 doesn't half look eerily similar to the dance moves from the Thriller video. Again, testament to how late in the day it seems that song was removed from the game. It's a cool little touch, and the animation is somewhat decent for the primitive 8-bit hardware it's running on. It's certainly worth touching on, seeing as so many licensed movie games become such generic, by numbers and eminently shit experiences, that Sega at least used the license as well as they could to service the game mechanics, and I do appreciate that about it. So 15 levels of hide and seek, a little platforming, a bit puzzling, some enemies to kick to death. The variety in the levels stop it from being too repetitive. The controls are genuinely tight and responsive, and the collision detection is largely very fair. It's a good looking game considering the hardware was already 5 years old at the time, and I actually had a really good time playing through it. It's perhaps not quite on par with the MegaDrive version, but it does a really good job in its own right. And then, just as I'm about to tell you that this is a game you absolutely should play, it happened. Once all the little girls have been rescued and Mr. Big soldiers and henchmen have all been kicked in the bollocks to death, Mike turns into a robot, of course, and the final battles with Joe Pesci begin. Stage 6-1 is a bit of a bastard. Suddenly, the entire premise of the whole game goes completely out of the window. The hide and seek, the 2D side-scrolling platform mechanics, the simple combat is all set fire to, and Michael Jackson's Moonwalker suddenly becomes a fucking shooting gallery. You control Robo Mike at the bottom of the screen, able to scroll left and right and shoot bullets towards the top of the screen. In the middle at the top is Mr. Big, safely hidden behind some protective glass. He's flanked by 2 platforms to his left and another 2 to the right, where his soldier henchmen spawn and shoot at you. Initially, I presume he had to shoot Joe in the face, so I spent a few lives and continues trying to do that. The issue here, though, is that the enemies that spawn shoot these quick laser shots at you with an alarming level of accuracy. Robo Mike isn't quick on his feet either, so moving out of the way of an incoming shot is tricky enough. But the other issue is that the bullets you shoot back move at about the speed of a tortoise with 3 broken legs trying to crawl through a river of fucking treacle. After a few goes, I realised that the screen was telling me that there were 30 henchmen, and each time I did manage to kill one, that number drops. Fueled by this light bulb revelation, I then took the next 15 minutes or so trying to kill the required number of henchmen before getting hit 8 times, which is a hell of a lot harder than it sounds. Honestly, I get games having difficulty spikes, but this didn't feel like a spike, it felt like a fucking wall. But some perseverance and practice, and I managed to murder all 30 henchmen with a single piece of health remaining. Now surely all that was left to do was shoot the shit out of Mr. Big and put the game to bed, right? Nah. If 6-1 was a bit of a bastard, then Stage 2 is an absolute rage-inducing, controller-smashing, for fuck's sake level of utter bastard. Seriously, it makes Elden Ring look like my friend Peppa fucking Pig. An absolute ginormous shithead of a level that genuinely tested my patience for a couple of hours. And all I can say is thank God this game has got infinite continues, else I would never ever have finished it. Robo Mike turns into a spaceship for this one, and it plays very much like the same shooting gallery from the previous stage, except this time, the enemies are these 4 cannons spread out in a line. Each cannon opens randomly for a split second to shoot a laser at you, and it's at this precise second when it is opened that you can actually damage it. Even as a spaceship, your bullets are the same speed as the injured tortoise through fucking treacle from the previous level, so trying to time these shots becomes a matter of praying to whatever deity you choose that you've somehow got to get the timing right. You then need to pray to said deity even harder to ask that the cannon you've lined up with and perfectly timed your shot at just so happens to be the one that opens. And while all of that is going on, every single laser shot from those cannons is fucking heat-seeking. If the wrong cannon opens and you're anywhere near it, you're taking damage. As before, you can take 8 hits before this white screen flash of doom, so you need to hit 12 perfectly timed, perfectly aimed hits on these cannons before their heat-seeking bullets hit you 8 times. I legitimately struggled with this level. A tiny hint of research is all that it will take to find out that this level is notorious for its difficulty. It's genuinely one of the hardest last bosses in a game of the era, and especially for one where the game was mostly pretty easy for the vast majority of it. And my reward when I finally fluked my way past it? A 5-second cutscene and Michael Jackson dancing next to some fucking credits. Look, I'm not saying it ruins the game, but that level is just so out of sync with the rest of the game. It introduces a whole new genre right at the death, and instantly ramps the difficulty up super high. I don't quite know what the thinking was here. Like I said, the game has infinite continues. If you're going to play an original cart of this, just make sure you factor in a good couple of hours to beat Stage 6. And if you're going to play it on an emulator, be ready to use save states to your advantage. Or load in the action replay code for invincibility if you really have to. But honestly, last level aside, I really enjoyed Moonwalker. If you've never played it, then the arcade version and the MegaDrive versions are both superior to this, so I would recommend them over this one. But honestly, there's still a lot of fun to be had with the Master System version. And if you're a Moonwalker veteran who's never played this version before, I'd definitely recommend it. For the complete Moonwalker experience, there's also home computer versions for the ZX Spectrum, the Commodore 64, and the Amiga, which are totally different again to the Sega version, although to be honest, they're nowhere near as good as the Sega version either. But at least the last level in those versions wasn't such an absolute shit. Thanks a lot for watching. I'd really appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and please consider dropping a free subscription to the channel if you like video games. Let me know in the comments how many times you died on 6-2, and which version of Moonwalker is your favourite. And if you've got a favourite retro game that you want me to do the retrospective treatment on, please suggest it in the comments and I might just make it. Until next time, be awesome to each other, and I unconditionally love your hecking faces.